John Carter squinted against the glaring lights of the Diarzal throne room, his hands tightly bound behind his back. The room was filled with alien warriors, each one more intimidating than the last. Their eyes gleamed with a cold, predatory intelligence, and their armor, dark and jagged, reflected the harsh red glow of the overhead lights. John felt like a cornered animal, surrounded on all sides by beings who viewed him as little more than a curiosity, or worse, prey. Human. The booming voice of the supreme warlord, Kralgor, echoed through the chamber, drawing John's attention. The warlord was a hulking figure, towering over everyone else, his presence commanding and dangerous. He sat on a throne carved from the bones of fallen enemies, his expression unreadable behind the elaborate metal mask that obscured half his face. "I have an offer for you." John straightened, his instincts screaming at him to remain alert. "I'm not interested in any deals," he replied, his voice steady, though his mind raced. He was a soldier, not a diplomat, and he knew better than to trust anything a Diarzal leader would propose. Kralgor's laugh was low and grating, more like the rumble of distant thunder than genuine amusement. "You misunderstand. This is not a request. You are in no position to refuse." He motioned to his guards, who stepped forward, their movements synchronized and menacing. "You will marry my daughter." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. John blinked, certain he hadn't heard correctly. "Marry your daughter?" he repeated, incredulous. "You've got to be kidding me." The warlord leaned forward, his expression hardening. "This union would symbolize a pact between our species, a peace agreement that could end the bloodshed between our people. You, a human hero, and my daughter, a symbol of Diarzal honor." John glanced around, noticing the guarded expressions of the aliens in the room. He could sense their disdain. This was not just a political move. It was a test of loyalty, a humiliation designed to break him. "And if I refuse?" Kralgor's smile was cold. "Then you will be executed, and Earth will burn under our fleets. Your people will not have the luxury of surrender." John clenched his jaw, his mind working furiously. The last thing he wanted was to be a pawn in some alien power play. But he knew Earth's position was desperate. The Diarzal had been advancing relentlessly, and humanity was struggling to hold the line. This marriage was more than just a bizarre demand. It was a strategic lifeline, one that could buy Earth precious time. Before John could respond, the heavy doors at the back of the throne room swung open, and in walked Zara, the warlord's daughter. She was unlike any Diarzal he had seen before. Her features were rough, even by alien standards. Pale, scaled skin marred by ridges and scars, and eyes that seemed too large for her face. She wore ceremonial armor, but it was clear she was no ordinary princess. There was strength in the way she moved, a confidence that belied her otherwise off-putting appearance. Zara stopped in front of her father and glanced at John, her gaze assessing. "This is a human?" she asked, her voice carrying a sharp edge. "He looks fragile." John bristled but held his tongue. It was clear that Zara was used to command, and her tone suggested she was not thrilled with the arrangement either. He wondered briefly if she had any say in this proposal, or if she was just as much a prisoner of her father's ambitions as he was. Kralgor nodded. "He is, and he will be your husband." Zara's lip curled slightly, though whether in disdain or something else, John couldn't tell. She turned to John, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You must understand, human," she said, her voice lowering. "This is no honor. This is a political move, a way for my father to control both our fates." John met her gaze, surprised by the bluntness of her words. There was no pretense, no attempt to sugarcoat the reality of their situation. "I get it," he replied. "Neither of us wants this, but it's what's on the table. So, what do you think? Can we make this work?" Zara studied him for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "We have no choice. But do not think for a moment that I will tolerate weakness." She turned back to her father. "Let's get this over with." The warlord clapped his hands, and the room sprang into action. Alien attendants rushed forward, preparing for the hasty ceremony. John felt a strange mix of dread and determination. He was entering uncharted territory, tied to a fate he hadn't chosen, but he was a survivor, and he wasn't about to let the Dirzal break him. The wedding was brief and devoid of any warmth. The Dirzal officiant recited vows in a harsh, guttural language, and John was handed a blade, which he used to mark his palm, an alien tradition signifying a binding pact. Zara did the same, her blood mingling with his in a small, ceremonial bowl. The onlookers watched in silence, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. As the ceremony concluded, John and Zara turned to leave. The silence that followed was unsettling, heavy with unspoken judgments. John couldn't help but feel like he was walking into a trap. But as they stepped out of the grand hall, the Dirzal warriors began to murmur, their voices low and shocked. Zara glanced at John, her eyes flickering with a hint of defiance. "Let them talk," she said quietly. "They've never seen anything like this before." John nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of what had just happened. He had married an alien warlord's daughter under threat of death, but this was just the beginning. He had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. John and Zara were ushered out of the throne room and into a smaller chamber, dimly lit and lined with strange symbols carved into the dark stone walls. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, filled with the scent of incense and burning oils that made John's head swim. He could hear the low murmur of the Dirzal warriors outside, their voices laced with a mixture of disbelief and resentment. The ceremony had been a blur, a whirlwind of alien rituals that John barely understood. He could still feel the sting of the ceremonial cut on his palm, the bloodied blade now a symbol of his unwanted alliance. Zara stood beside him, her expression unreadable as she adjusted the straps of her armor. She was calm, composed, yet John could sense the tension radiating from her. John glanced at her, trying to read her mood. "So what now?" he asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "We just play house on the ship?" Zara shot him a sideways look, her eyes narrowing. "You misunderstand, human. This isn't about us pretending to be something we're not. The ceremony was only the first step. Now, we have to prove that this union is functional. My father expects us to play our roles convincingly." John leaned against the cold wall, feeling the weight of her words. "And what exactly does convincing mean to the Dirzal? Because I'm not much for acting." Zara's gaze was sharp, almost challenging. "It means showing strength, competence, and the ability to adapt. My father has thrown us into the situation as a spectacle. To the Dirzal, weakness is unacceptable. Publicly, we must appear united, unbreakable, even if it's all a farce." John smirked, trying to mask his unease. "Great. A stage marriage to keep the peace while your old man watches us like lab rats." Zara nodded slowly. "More or less. My father doesn't expect you to last long. He's hoping you'll slip, that your human frailties will show, and he'll use that to justify resuming his conquest of Earth." She paused, a flicker of something resembling frustration crossing her features. "He's already planted the seeds of doubt among his own people. Many think this marriage is a joke, an insult. We're on display, and every mistake will be magnified." John felt his blood boil at the thought of being used as a pawn in Kralgor's games. But he kept his voice even. "Then we don't make mistakes. Simple as that." Zara's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "It's never simple, but we must try. I've been trained for situations like this. My entire life has been about survival and strategy." She hesitated, then added, "I did not choose this either, but I won't let my father win, and I won't let you drag me down." John looked at her closely. There was a fierceness in Zara that he hadn't fully appreciated until now. She wasn't just a pawn. She was a player in this game, every bit as trapped and determined as he was. "All right then," he said, his voice firm. "We play along, but I need to know what I'm dealing with. What's your angle?" Zara's eyes met his unflinching. "My angle? Survival. And maybe, just maybe, proving that I am not the worthless daughter my father thinks I am. This is my chance to rewrite my place in the Diarzal hierarchy. And if I can help keep your people alive in the process, then that's a bonus. John nodded, appreciating her honesty. There was no pretense between them, just a raw acknowledgement of the reality they faced. All right, we stick together for now, but you have to level with me. If there's something I need to know, you tell me. No secrets. Zara considered his words, then gave a short nod. Agreed. And you, human, need to learn quickly. Our ways are not your ways. What might seem like a small gesture to you could mean something entirely different here. We are constantly watched, judged. As if to emphasize her point, the door to their chamber opened and a Diarzal official stepped in, a tall, thin figure clad in ornate robes that signified his rank. He eyed John and Zara with a mix of contempt and curiosity. The Supreme Warlord wishes to see you both immediately, he announced, his voice dripping with disdain. You are to present yourselves in the main hall. Zara gave John a quick look, signaling him to follow. Together, they walked through the winding corridors of the battlecruiser, flanked by guards who kept a close watch. The main hall was a vast, intimidating space, filled with rows of warriors standing at attention. At the far end, Kralgor awaited on his throne, his presence looming large and oppressive. The warlord wasted no time as they approached. My daughter and her human husband, he said, his tone mocking. How does it feel to be bound together in such a unique fashion? John kept his face neutral, refusing to give the warlord the satisfaction of a reaction. We're adjusting, he replied evenly. Doing what's necessary. Kralgor's eyes glinted with amusement. Necessary? Yes, I imagine this must feel very necessary. But remember, human, this arrangement exists because I allow it. Your life and your world's survival are at my discretion. Zara stepped forward, her voice sharp. We are here because you demanded it, Father, and we will succeed because that is what you expect of us. Do not mistake our compliance for weakness. The warlord's smile faded slightly, his gaze hardening. Watch yourself, daughter. You may wear the armor of a Diarzal warrior, but you are still far from earning my respect. Prove your worth, or I will not hesitate to correct this mistake. With a dismissive wave, Kralgor signaled the end of the audience. John and Zara turned away, the weight of the warlord's threat hanging heavy between them. As they exited the hall, John could hear the hushed whispers of the warriors, each one echoing with doubt and scorn. Once they were alone again, John exhaled slowly, the tension of the encounter still coursing through him. Your old man really knows how to set the mood, he muttered, half joking but fully aware of the danger they were in. Zara glanced at him, her expression guarded. It's only the beginning, human. He will push us, test us. We can use this time to our advantage. We learn, we adapt, and we survive. John nodded, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with the alien woman beside him. They were both stuck in a no-win situation, but at least they had one thing in common, a refusal to be beaten by Kralgor's manipulations. Together, they would fight, not just for survival, but to prove that even the most unlikely pair could outsmart the greatest of enemies. John and Zara were escorted to their designated quarters aboard the Diarzal battlecruiser, a cold, imposing room that felt more like a cell than a living space. The walls were metallic, adorned with alien symbols and harsh lighting that gave the place an unsettling atmosphere. A single narrow window offered a view of the endless expanse of space, reminding John of just how far from home he really was. Zara moved around the room with a deliberate grace, adjusting her gear and checking various concealed compartments as if she were searching for something. John watched her, still trying to wrap his mind around the situation. Here he was, a human soldier married to the alien daughter of his enemy. It felt surreal, like he was trapped in someone else's nightmare. So, John began, breaking the silence. How do you handle all this? The politics, the games? It's like your father wants to make everyone suffer just to prove a point. Zara paused, her back to him, before turning around with a measured look. You assume this is about power and pride, but the Diarizal Empire is more complicated than that. Every move my father makes is calculated. It's not just about dominance. It's about maintaining control inside and outside the empire. I learned that the hard way. John leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Seems like you've been dealt a bad hand, too. Why go along with it? Why not fight back? Zara's eyes narrowed slightly, and she considered his question carefully. Because human, in Diarzal culture, rebellion is not just seen as defiance. It's a death sentence. My father is a master of manipulation, and he surrounds himself with those who fear him more than they hate him. If I am to survive and one day change my fate, I must play my role well. John nodded, feeling an unexpected sense of kinship. They were both trapped by forces larger than themselves. Then I guess we're in the same boat, he said. Neither of us wants to be here, but we don't have much choice. Zara tilted her head, studying him closely. You're different from what I expected, human. Most of your kind would rather die than be seen standing beside a Diarzal, let alone married to one. John smirked, though there was no humor in it. Yeah, well, this wasn't exactly my dream wedding, but I've been in worse spots. At least here, I've got a chance to do something. Maybe even help Earth figure out how to deal with your people. Zara nodded thoughtfully. It's true. You're in a unique position to observe, to learn. And so am I. My father doesn't realize it, but he's put us both in a position to gather information, not just on each other, but on our respective cultures. John watched her closely, intrigued by her insight. So what do you suggest? We spy on our own people? Play double agents? Zara smiled faintly. Not exactly. We don't have to betray our sides to gain an advantage. But knowledge is power, and right now, we are at the center of it. For the first time, Diarizal and human minds are working in tandem, even if it's under duress. John's eyes flicked to the narrow window, where stars streaked past in the distance. I've never been one to turn down an opportunity, but you've got to level with me, Zara. If there's something you know about your father's plans, something that could help Earth, I need to hear it. Zara was silent for a long moment, as if weighing her options. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and cautious. My father does not believe in peace. This marriage is a diversion. While we're here, pretending to unite our people, he's positioning his fleets near your outer colonies. He plans to strike soon, a surprise attack that will cripple your defenses. John's heart sank. So this whole thing is a smokescreen? He never intended to honor any peace agreement. Zara's expression hardened. No, but he underestimated me, and he underestimated you. Together, we can change the game. I have access to information that could help your people prepare. But I need you to trust me, John. If we're going to survive this, we have to work together, no matter how impossible it seems. John hesitated, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Zara's offer was dangerous, but it was also their best shot at turning the tide. All right, he said finally, extending his hand to her. We're in this together. No secrets, no games. We do whatever it takes. Zara looked at his outstretched hand for a moment before shaking it firmly. Agreed. We will act as one. But remember, John, the Diarzal are always watching. We must be smarter than them at every turn. Their pact made, John and Zara began to share information, strategizing late into the night. John learned about Diarizal battle tactics, ship weaknesses, and the deep-rooted hierarchies that governed their society. Zara, in turn, absorbed everything John knew about human warfare, resource management, and the psychology of Earth's military command. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they had to gain from each other's knowledge. Days passed, and John found himself growing accustomed to Zara's presence. Her sharp wit and strategic mind were a stark contrast to the brutal reputation of her people. In moments of quiet, he would catch glimpses of the person beneath the armor, a Diarzal who had spent her life under her father's shadow, fighting to prove her worth. One evening, as they sat reviewing star maps of Earth's colonies, John noticed something he hadn't seen before, a faint network of supply routes that intersected Diarzal territory in unexpected ways. "These routes," he said, pointing them out. "They're not just military, are they? They look like trade lanes." "Smuggling?" Zara nodded, impressed by his observation. "Yes, my father profits from both war and the black market. Weapons, resources, even information, it all flows through these channels. It's one of the reasons he's so powerful. He controls not just the fleets, but the entire economy of war." John's mind raced. This was critical intel, something that could change the entire approach to the war. If we can disrupt these lanes, even temporarily, it could cripple his operations. Earth's forces could gain the upper hand. Zara smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Exactly. And that's where you come in. Your people have technology that can interfere with our communications. If we coordinate, we can launch a strike against these networks, cutting off supplies before they reach the front lines." John nodded, feeling the first stirrings of hope. They were no longer just playing along with Crawl Gore's twisted game. They were starting to fight back, in their own way. "Let's do it. We'll hit them where it hurts." As they finalized their plan, John couldn't help but feel that, against all odds, he had found an ally in the most unlikely of places. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time since this ordeal began, he felt like they had a fighting chance. John and Zara moved carefully through the corridors of the Diarzal battlecruiser, their footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor. The ship, a monstrous structure of alien engineering, was a maze of intersecting passageways and hidden chambers, each one filled with the hum of advanced machinery and the constant, unnerving presence of Diarzal warriors. John had grown accustomed to the strange architecture, but today, everything felt more dangerous. He and Zara were about to cross a line that could get them both killed. The plan they had hatched, using Diarzal's own supply routes against them, was already in motion. John had secretly transmitted intel back to Earth's military, warning them of the impending attack on their colonies, and detailing the locations of key Diarzal smuggling lanes. The response from Earth had been swift and silent. Preparations for a counterstrike were underway. Now, it was all about timing. Zara led the way, her posture rigid and focused. She had been quieter than usual, a sign that she was deep in thought or, perhaps, on edge about what they were about to do. As they reached the command center, a secured room that controlled the ship's internal systems, Zara stopped and glanced at John. Her expression was serious, eyes narrowed in determination. "We need to access the central console," she whispered, pointing to a large, heavily guarded door. "From there, I can alter the coordinates of several Diarzal ships, redirecting them away from Earth's vulnerable points. But we only have a small window. Once we start, they'll know something's wrong." John nodded, checking the small device Zara had given him. A handheld jammer designed to disrupt Diarzal security sensors for a few precious moments. "Are you sure about this? If your father finds out, he'll come down on us hard." Zara's gaze didn't waver. "I've been sure of nothing in my life except that I will not die as my father's puppet. This is our chance to make a difference. Are you with me?" John gave a resolute nod. "Let's do it." They moved swiftly, activating the jammer and slipping past the guard station outside the command center. Inside, the room was filled with glowing displays, holographic maps, and rows of alien data consoles. Zara moved quickly to one of the main terminals, her fingers dancing across the touch-sensitive surface, inputting commands in a language John still struggled to understand. John kept watch, glancing nervously at the door every few seconds. The weight of their actions hung heavy in the air. If they were caught, there would be no escape. Zara's father would make sure they paid the ultimate price for this betrayal. Zara worked with practiced efficiency, her expression focused and determined. "I'm rerouting 3 of the strike groups now," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "That'll buy Earth some time. but we need to. Before she could finish, the door burst open and a squad of Diarzal warriors stormed in, weapons drawn. John reacted instantly, grabbing a nearby tool and hurling it at the lead soldier's head. The alien staggered, giving John just enough time to dive for cover. Zara pulled a blaster from her belt, firing at the guards, her shots precise and lethal. The room erupted into chaos as alarms blared and red lights flashed. "Zara," John shouted, ducking behind a console. "We've got to move." Zara fired off another shot, then grabbed John's arm, pulling him toward a side exit. "This way!" she yelled, shoving him through the door as more guards poured into the room. They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of heavy footsteps and shouting voices echoing behind them. John could feel his heart pounding as they turned a corner and ducked into a maintenance shaft, barely evading the pursuing soldiers. "That was close," he panted, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're not going to get another chance like that." Zara nodded, breathing heavily. "We did what we could. The ships are off course, and Earth has been warned. But my father will not let this go. He'll hunt us down." They crawled through the narrow shaft, each movement slow and careful to avoid making noise. As they emerged into a dark storage area, Zara paused, her expression grim. "I didn't expect them to respond so quickly. Someone must have tipped them off." John frowned, the realization dawning on him. "A leak? Someone in your father's inner circle." Zara's jaw tightened. "Or someone who wants to undermine him and us. There are factions within the Diarzal that resent my father's rule, but none would dare act openly. If someone set us up, it's because they're playing their own game." John leaned against a stack of crates, feeling the weight of their situation. "Great. So we're not just fighting your father. We're caught in the middle of a power struggle." Zara nodded slowly, a flicker of anger crossing her face. "Yes, and that makes things even more dangerous. Whoever betrayed us could be using this to weaken my father's grip on power. If they succeed, it could trigger a civil war within the Empire, and that chaos could spill over into your world." John ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the rapidly shifting dynamics. "We need to figure out who's behind this. If we can expose them, maybe we can turn this to our advantage." Zara looked at him, her eyes sharp and determined. "I know someone who might have answers. An old contact, a trader who operates in the gray areas of Diarzal space. He deals in information, and he owes me a favor." John nodded, seeing no other option. "All right, let's find him, but we've got to be careful. Whoever's playing this game knows we're a threat, and they won't hesitate to finish what they started." Zara gave a curt nod, her mind already working through the next steps. They couldn't afford any more mistakes. One wrong move, and they'd both be dead. But for the first time, John felt a surge of confidence. They weren't just running. They were fighting back, piecing together the puzzle of betrayal and survival. As they made their way to the lower decks of the ship, John and Zara moved with renewed purpose. The odds were against them, but they were no longer just pawns in the Diarzal's brutal game. They were wild cards, unpredictable and dangerous, and in a galaxy ruled by fear and violence that made them a force to be reckoned with. Their journey was only beginning, but they had a common goal: to expose the truth and take down the powers that sought to destroy them. And for the first time since they were forced together, John felt like they had a real shot at winning. In the dimly lit underbelly of the Diarzal battlecruiser, John and Zara made their way cautiously toward the ship's hangar bay. The plan was clear but risky. They needed to secure a small vessel and escape the massive warship, all while avoiding the Diarzal warriors still hunting them. Their recent actions had turned the entire ship against them, making every shadow a potential enemy. Zara, who knew the ship's layout like the back of her hand, led the way. Her usual stoic demeanor had shifted into something more urgent, a testament to the stakes of their daring plan. "The hangar is heavily guarded, but there's a maintenance tunnel that runs parallel to it. We can use it to bypass most of the security checkpoints," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. John nodded, clutching the makeshift weapon he had fashioned from parts scavenged along the way. His military training had prepared him for tough situations, but escaping a hostile alien warship was something new altogether. And the ship? How do we know which one we can take without setting off every alarm on board? Zara glanced back at him, her eyes glinting with a mix of determination and worry. I've already mapped out a few options. There's an older model scout ship in Bay 12. It's not much to look at, and most importantly, it's due for maintenance, which means minimal security locks and no immediate tracking. As they approached the entrance to the maintenance tunnel, John felt his pulse quicken. The narrow opening was barely visible, hidden behind a panel marked with alien script. Zara pressed a sequence of symbols, and the panel slid aside with a quiet hiss, revealing the dark, cramped space beyond. "After you," John said, motioning for Zara to enter first. She nodded and slipped into the tunnel, John following close behind. Inside, the air was stale, and the only light came from the occasional flickering luminescent strip along the ceiling. They moved quickly but carefully, aware that any noise could betray their position. They had been moving through the tunnel for what felt like hours when a sudden clatter echoed through the space ahead of them. John froze, signaling for Zara to stop. "What was that?" he whispered. Zara listened intently, then relaxed slightly. "Maintenance drones. They shouldn't be a threat, but we can't take any chances. Let's move to the side and let them pass." The pair flattened themselves against the tunnel wall as a series of small, wheeled robots trundled by, their sensors sweeping blindly past them. Once the drones had passed, John and Zara continued, emerging finally into a larger service area adjacent to the hangar bay. Peeking out, Zara pointed to a distant figure moving away from them, toward a cluster of ships. "There, Bay 12. That's our ship." They waited until the coast was clear before making a break across the open space to the designated bay. The scout ship was indeed unassuming, a small, sleek vessel that looked barely capable of interstellar travel. But as they approached, John felt a surge of hope. It was their ticket out of here. Zara quickly accessed the ship's control panel, her fingers flying over the alien interface. The hatch hissed open, and they slipped inside. "I'm starting the pre-flight sequence now," she said, strapping herself into the pilot's seat. John took the co-pilot's seat beside her, watching as the hangar bay doors slowly began to open. The sound of alarms filled the air, and John tensed, ready for one last fight. "They know we're here," he said, gripping his seat. Zara nodded, her focus unwavering. "I know. Hold on." With a sudden lurch, the scout ship shot forward, speeding out of the hangar and into the vastness of space. John glanced back, just in time to see several DRZOL fighters detaching from the main ship, their engines flaring as they began to pursue. Zara maneuvered the ship with impressive skill, dodging debris and incoming fire. "We're not out of this yet," she shouted over the roar of the engines. "Those fighters are faster than us, but I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." John watched the sensors, his heart pounding as the DRZOL fighters gained on them. But then, Zara flipped a switch, and the scout ship jolted violently, disappearing from the DRZOL sensors, a ghost maneuver he'd never seen before. For a moment, they were invisible, slipping through the fingers of their pursuers. Zara didn't waste the opportunity, putting as much distance between them and the DRZOL as possible. As the adrenaline of the escape began to wear off, John turned to Zara, a mix of awe and gratitude on his face. "That was incredible," he said, letting out a long breath. Zara smiled, her eyes still on the vast star field ahead of them. "We're not clear yet, but we've got a chance now. Let's make it count, together." They set a course for a remote outpost on the edge of neutral space, a place where they could regroup and plan their next move. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but for the first time, John felt they might just have a fighting chance. With Zara by his side, anything seemed possible. With the DRZOL battlecruiser, now a distant shadow behind them, John and Zara navigated the stolen scout ship through the less patrolled sectors towards Earth. The plan was clear. Warn Earth's defenses of the impending Drzal attack, then assist in formulating a counterstrike using the intelligence they had gathered. As they approached the Sol system, however, the silence of the void was shattered by urgent alerts. Our timing couldn't be worse, Zara noted grimly, her eyes scanning the incoming data. Drzal warships have already begun their assault on Earth's outer stations. John leaned forward, studying the tactical display. We need to get to Earth Command. If we can coordinate with the fleet, using your intel, we can give them an edge. Zara nodded, adjusting their trajectory. I'm setting a course for Earth's primary defense station. Hold tight. This is going to get rough. As they approached, the stark reality of war greeted them. Earth's forces, outnumbered and outgunned, were engaged in a desperate battle against the Drzal fleet. The view from their cockpit displayed the chaotic dance of ships weaving and dodging through deadly streams of plasma fire. John's hands clenched as he watched. We can't just sit back. Let's get in there and do what we can to help. Zara quickly relayed their credentials and intentions to Earth Command. After a tense moment, they were granted clearance and directed to join the defense. As they dove into the fray, John took control of the ship's weapon systems, targeting Drzal ships with precise, calculated shots. Their flanks are weaker. Aim for the junction points I'm highlighting on your display, Zara instructed, her voice calm amidst the chaos. Together, they managed to take down several Drzal fighters, providing much-needed relief to the Earth forces. But it was clear that this was only a temporary reprieve. The Drzal were methodically overpowering the human defenses with superior numbers and firepower. We need a new plan, John said, frustration edging his voice as he evaded a barrage of enemy fire. There's no way we can outgun them like this. Zara was silent for a moment, analyzing the battlefield. Suddenly, she keyed into their communications. Earth Command, this is Zara. I have crucial intelligence about the Drzal formations. Redirect your remaining forces to coordinate with my plan. We can cut off their advance if we strike strategically. The next few minutes were a blur of intense coordination and maneuvering. Zara relayed complex tactical data to the Earth fleet, directing them to exploit vulnerabilities in the Drzal formation that only she could have known. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The Earth forces, reinvigorated by Zara's guidance, executed a series of precise strikes that caught the Drzal off guard. John watched in awe as Zara seamlessly integrated with the human commanders, her deep understanding of her own people's tactics turning her into an invaluable asset. You're doing it, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. You're actually turning this around. Zara's focus didn't waver. We're not done yet. The main Drzal cruiser still poses a significant threat. With a nod, John redirected power to their engines, closing the distance to the imposing Drzal cruiser. Let's give them something to think about, he muttered, priming their remaining torpedoes. As they approached, the cruiser seemed to sense their intention, turning its formidable arsenal towards them. John and Zara worked in perfect unison, dodging debris and incoming fire, weaving through the chaos of battle towards their target. Now! Zara yelled, and John fired their torpedoes directly into a weak spot she had identified on the cruiser's hull. The impact was immediate and devastating. A series of internal explosions rocked the cruiser, its shields flickering and failing. With the Drzal flagship crippled, the morale of their fleet faltered. Taking advantage, Earth's forces rallied, pushing forward with renewed vigor and slowly but surely driving the invaders back. As the battle drew to a close, the Drzal fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began a hasty retreat. Earth's forces, though battered, had survived, and the threat was momentarily staved off thanks to the unexpected collaboration between a human pilot and an alien strategist. Zara slumped back in her seat, exhaustion lining her face. We did it, she said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. John turned to her, his expression one of deep respect. No, you did it. You saved us all today. As they set a course back to Earth, the weight of their victory and the road ahead hung over them. There was still much to do, alliances to forge and wounds to heal. But in that moment, John and Zara knew they had changed the course of the war. Together, they had proven that unity and understanding could prevail against the mightiest of foes. The aftermath of the battle left Earth's orbital defenses in a state of disarray but ultimately victorious, thanks to the tactical edge provided by John and Zara. As their scout ship docked at the main Earth defense station, they were met not with immediate celebration, but with cautious, if not suspicious, glances, particularly at Zara. Zara stepped off the ship with a calm demeanor, despite the wary eyes of the human soldiers that lined the hangar. John, feeling protective of his unlikely ally, stayed close, matching her pace. "Remember, not everyone will understand why you're here," John whispered to her, noting the mix of curiosity and mistrust in the eyes of his fellow Earth defenders. "I am prepared for their judgment," Zara responded quietly, her voice betraying none of the tension she must have felt. They were quickly escorted to a secure briefing room where Earth's military leaders had assembled. The air was thick with apprehension and the residue of battle, burnt circuits, and ionized air. A high-ranking general, a stern woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward to meet them. "Carter, you've done a commendable job under extraordinary circumstances," she began, her gaze then shifting coolly toward Zara. "And you must be the Diarzal tactician who's been aiding our efforts." Zara nodded, her posture rigid. "I am Zara. I have provided what assistance I could. My only interest is in stopping this war." The room buzzed with whispered conversations among the officers, some clearly not ready to accept the word of an alien, especially a Diarzal. The general raised her hand for silence. "This war has taught us to be skeptical of all things Diarzal, but today we saw a different outcome. Let's hear what she has to say." Zara detailed her strategic maneuvers and the insights she had on the Diarzal command structure, information that could be vital for future engagements. John watched as the initial skepticism in the room slowly gave way to reluctant acknowledgement. After the debriefing, as they walked through the corridors of the station, John could see the conflicted emotions on the faces of many soldiers. They were grateful for the victory, but unsure of the alliance that had brought it about. Zara seemed to sense the shift in perception. "It is not easy for them, or for me, to see a potential enemy as an ally," she said, her voice soft. John nodded. "But you've made a difference, Zara. They'll see that eventually. Wars aren't just won on battlefields. They're won in the minds of those who dare to change." As days turned into weeks, Zara worked closely with Earth strategists, planning defensive maneuvers and bolstering weak points in the human defenses. Slowly, the soldiers began to regard her not just with respect, but with a kind of admiration. One evening, as they looked out at the stars from the observation deck of the station, John said, "You've changed things, Zara. More than you know. Not just tactics and strategies, but perceptions. Maybe this is the start of something new for all of us." Zara looked out at the vastness of space, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Perhaps it is possible," she mused. "Perhaps we can build a future where Diarzal and humans stand together not as foes, but as equals." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Zara's father, the Diarzal warlord, demanding to speak with her. They moved to a communication room where his imposing figure appeared on the screen, his expression one of barely contained fury. "You have betrayed your people and your heritage," he roared, his voice filling the room. Zara stood firm, her voice steady. "I have betrayed no one. I am fighting for a future where our people do not destroy each other over old hatreds and fears. What I have started here, I will continue, regardless of your threats." The warlord's image flickered with static as he cut the transmission, his final look one of wrath mixed with a grudging respect. Turning from the screen, Zara faced John, her expression resolute. "My path is clear. I may have lost a father, but I have gained a new cause." John reached out, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "And you're not alone in this. We're with you, Zara, all the way." As they returned to the observation deck, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, the future a little more hopeful. For John and Zara, the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but together, they had already begun to forge a new path, one of understanding and mutual respect. The victory against the Dr. had given Earth a rare moment of respite, but the threat of a counterattack loomed large. Zara's father, the Dr. warlord, had not taken his daughter's betrayal lightly, nor the setbacks she had engineered against his fleet. Earth's leadership, while grateful for Zara's aid, remained on high alert, knowing the Dr. were regrouping for a possible devastating strike. In the Strategic Command Center, John and Zara, along with a team of Earth's top military strategists, pored over simulations and reports. The atmosphere was tense, each person aware that the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. Zara was the focal point of the discussions, providing critical insights into Dr. tactics and suggesting countermeasures. Despite her alien nature, she had started to earn her place among the team. Her contributions no longer met with overt skepticism, but with a cautious respect. During a break in the strategizing, John pulled Zara aside. "How are you holding up?" he asked, noting the slight fatigue that seemed to shadow her otherwise stoic facade. Zara managed a small smile. "I am used to adversity, John, but I am not immune to it. The weight of what I have done, turning against my father, my people, it does not escape me. But I see its necessity for a greater peace." John nodded, understanding the burden she carried. "You've changed the course of this war, Zara. Whatever comes, you've given us a chance to end it on our terms." Their conversation was cut short by an urgent summons back to the main floor. The room fell silent as the main screen lit up with a transmission from the Dr. warlord. His visage was grim, his voice cold and controlled. "I offer you one chance for peace," he began, his eyes fixed menacingly on Zara. "Surrender my daughter, the traitor, and cease your hostilities against my forces. Fail to comply, and I will unleash such fury upon your world that nothing will remain but ash." The threat hung heavy in the air, every eye in the room turning to Zara. She stood, her figure resolute, her voice steady as she addressed the warlord. "Father, your path of destruction will only lead to our mutual ruin. I stand with Earth, not as your enemy, but as a voice of reason. Turn back from this course. Let us seek a new way forward." The warlord's sneer was palpable. "There is no place for you among us any longer, daughter. You choose these humans over your own kin. You will share their fate." As the screen went dark, a heavy silence settled over the room. The Earth commanders looked to each other, then to Zara, who faced them with a calm determination. "It seems we are at an impasse," Zara said. "My father will not budge from his course. We must prepare for the worst." Plans were quickly drawn up, leveraging every piece of knowledge Zara could provide. Earth's forces began a massive mobilization, positioning their fleets to intercept the Dr. at several strategic points. John and Zara worked tirelessly, their bond strengthened by the shared goal of protecting a world that was slowly becoming their mutual home. Days turned into tense anticipation as reports came in of Dr. fleet movements. Then, in a decisive moment, Earth's defenses met the Dr. in a series of skirmishes that erupted across multiple fronts. The battle was fierce, with losses on both sides, but the Earth forces, guided by Zara's expertise, managed to hold the line. The turning point came when John led a daring mission to disable the Dr.'s flagship, using a prototype weapon that Zara had helped develop. The mission was risky, almost suicidal, but it succeeded, leaving the Dr. fleet in disarray and their command structure crippled. In the aftermath, a ceasefire was called. The warlord, his resources depleted and his position weakened, had no choice but to negotiate. The peace talks were long and fraught with tension, but eventually a treaty was signed. Earth and the Dr. would cease hostilities and begin the process of establishing a tentative alliance. As peace settled over the once embattled regions, John and Zara stood together, looking out at the stars from Earth's now quiet defense station. "We did it, Zara," John said, his voice a mix of relief and wonder. "After everything, we actually did it. Zara looked up at the sky, her expression thoughtful. Yes, we did. But this is only the beginning, John. True peace will require more than treaties. It will require understanding, patience, and time. John took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Then we'll face that together, too. The final chapter closed on a note of hope and cautious optimism. Earth had survived the brink of annihilation, not just through might, but through the unlikely alliance between a human and an alien, who together had forged a new path toward peace.